going to take a look at chapter 8, and this is the chapter that all of your work in ALEKS is coming from. So we're going to look at measures of length and converting units. So our objectives here are to be able to convert measurements of length in the English system, to be able to do them in the metric system, and then to go back and forth between them. So what is the English system? Well, the English system is what we typically use to measure. So things like inches, feet, miles. That's typically the measurements that we use. We don't tend to use things like centimeters and meters and kilometers because this is the convention of our system. So these are the conversion factors. You probably want to write these down somewhere. That way you have them easy to access. So when we're teaching students the idea of measurement, we want them to be able to do a dimensional analysis. So this is a fancy word that really just means they should be able to convert units and then kind of spatially visualize them. Now, the younger students are going to have a little bit tougher of a time with this. So that's why we ask questions like, is a can of Coke going to be a gallon, or is it going to be ounces? So we ask those questions about what's the best way to measure, and that's where we're trying to get them to be able to do the visualization component of dimensional analysis. So it's really just rooted in this simple idea. If measurements in two different units represent the same length, then a fraction, so if I'm using a fraction formed from the two measurements, is equal to 1. So meaning if I have something of 3 feet converted to inches, the fraction that I'm multiplying by is going to keep it balanced. And we call this fraction a conversion factor. So if we take the measurement and we multiply it by the correct conversion factor, we're keeping things balanced and we're able to convert between units. So here's an example of how to do this. There's 5,280 feet in 1 mile. Use this fact to write two conversion factors. So they're just asking me to write the fraction, not to actually convert in part A. So in part A, there's two ways I can do this. I could convert feet to miles and then miles to feet. So there are two ways to write the conversion factor for feet to miles. If someone gives me a measurement in miles, I would want to use this one because you always want to use the one that matches the bottom. If somebody gave me something in feet and wanted me to convert to miles, I would use this conversion factor. So it's just flipping the fraction that's represented there. And so in part B, they want me to actually use it. So I have 2.3 miles and I want to convert that over to feet. So the way you do the conversion factor is you always choose the one with your current units in the denominator. So that's how I decided to use this conversion factor from my list. I wanted to go to miles, so then it had to be the one with miles in the denominator. Go to feet. So miles had to match the denominator. Then I just do the multiplication. Now what you're not going to see happen in your calculator is that the miles cancel out, and that's why it's so important that your current unit is in the denominator. And then you're going to simply do the multiplication of the numbers and you wind up in feet. So this tells us that there are 12,144 feet in 2.3 miles. Now the second multiplication that I want to do would be if I'm wanting to look at the units of miles are both in the numerator, then I get really weird stuff. So if I did it the opposite way, where miles is not in the denominator, I'm going to get an answer that doesn't make sense because I'm going to get 0.000436 miles squared per foot. So typically, if you choose the wrong conversion factor, it's really not going to make sense, and that's going to help you identify. So that was the purpose of doing that problem in part B. Now, what if I want to convert yards to feet? So if I want to convert 6 yards to feet, I need to choose the conversion factor with yards in the denominator. So there are 3 feet and 1 yard from my earlier slide. So if we navigate back to our earlier slide, 3 feet and 1 yard, which means my conversion factor is either 3 feet divided by 1 yard or 1 yard divided by 3 feet. So that's how I would write my conversion factors. Because I want to convert from yards to feet, I need the conversion factor that has yards in the denominator so that they will cancel out. And I do 6 times 3, which is 18, and I'm left with an answer in feet. So what about this? What if I want to convert to the highest point on Earth is Mount Everest at 2,035 feet? How many miles is that? Well, I'm going to go back to my slide that has the conversion factors, and I have two ways to write this. Either it's 5,280 feet divided by 1 mile, or it's 1 mile divided by 5,280 feet. So if I look at my example, they gave me feet, which means I need to use the conversion factor with feet in the denominator. So that's how I decide which one I chose here. Now I'm just taking this and multiplying by 1, but I have to divide by the 5,280, which is roughly 5.5 miles when you do the division. So what if I want to convert measures using 2 unit fractions? So these are 2-step conversions, which means I cannot go straight from one measurement to another. So if I want to go from miles to inches, you cannot make that jump. You have to first go from miles to feet and then feet to inches, because if you look at your conversion factor slide, I do not have a conversion factor from miles to inches, but I can go from miles to feet and then feet to inches. So I'm going to do it one step at a time. If I want to go from miles to feet, I need the conversion factor with miles in the denominator. And then if I want to go from feet to inches, I would need the measurement with feet in the denominator. And so then I would just follow the 3-step process of 11 times 5,280 times 12, which gives me my total value in inches. The key is really going to be here to listing these in order. So what if I want to convert for speed? So this time, what's different in this problem is I have 90 miles per hour. I have 2 measurements. I have a length measurement and I have a time measurement. How fast is that in feet per second? So I want you to take what I said about conversion factors and set that in the back of your mind, because it doesn't work accurately here. If I want to go from miles per hour to feet per second, I'm going to have to choose the conversion factor that has miles in the denominator. That does not change when you're looking at length. So when I look at length, I should follow the same process I just did and have miles in the denominator and feet. Now, when I'm converting hours to seconds, that is going to be different because it's a time factor in the denominator. It has to have hours in the numerator. So when we're doing 2-step conversions with units per time, you need to have the length measurement in the denominator, and then when I'm converting the time, it has to be in the numerator. So there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, and then in 1 minute there are 60 seconds. So I'm going to do 90 times 5,280, and then I'm going to do 60 times 60, and then I'm going to divide those two numbers to get 132 feet per second. So it's a little bit more tricky when I've got a time measurement involved there. So the metric system uses 3 basic units of measure: the meter, the liter, and the gram. Length in the metric system is measured using meters, which we say M for meters. 1 meter is a little more than a yard and roughly 39.4 inches. For capacity, so how much something can hold, I use the liter, which is a little more than a quart. And if you're not sure what a quart is, when you run to Baskin and Robbins and you get a quart of ice cream, that's a quart. And the symbol we use for liters is L. The basic unit for measurement of weight would be grams, and grams is a very small unit of measure. This is one of the reasons we don't use it in the English metric system. An example of that is a nickel. If you have a nickel, that weighs about 5 grams. So very, very small unit. These are the conversion factors that you will be using to be able to convert between metric units. They are described using powers of 10. So a kilometer, a kilogram, is 1,000 of whatever the unit is. So if it's a kilogram, it's 1,000 grams. If it's a kilometer, it's 1,000 meters. Then I have hecto, I have decta, and then when I get to deci, that's actually a smaller unit. So that's 1/10 of a gram, 1/10 of a meter. So this is the table you're going to need to be able to process the next couple of examples. To change to the larger unit to a smaller unit, so to go from kilograms to grams, I'm going to multiply by the factor in the table. If I want to go from a smaller unit to a larger unit, I'm going to divide by the factor in the table. So that means if I'm going from grams to this, then I would divide. If I'm going from kilograms to grams, I would multiply. That's what that slide means. So let's see it in action. 1 meter is the same as 100 centimeters. If I use dimensional analysis to convert from centimeters to meters, I'm going from a smaller unit to a larger unit. So I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to take that and say 455 centimeters. Oh, sorry. I'm going from smaller to larger. So I want to divide. Now notice my conversion factor is 1 meter over 100 centimeters. Notice that centimeters is in the denominator. So if you're not sure how to use that rule to multiply or divide, you can just say it's got to be in the denominator. So I'm going to do 455 divided by 100. And that's going to give me 4.55 meters. So it should make sense. Basically, we're moving the decimal place around. So if I want to convert from kilometers to centimeters, I have to first go to meters itself. I can't convert between prefixes without going to the actual value. So this is a bit tricky because I don't like the way the example shows this to you. So the way that I would do it would be to go from kilo to centimeters. We could say, okay, well, it's 5 steps away according to my table. What do I mean by 5 steps? So kilometer, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure if you actually saw that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be 10 to the 5th power is how the example does this. And I'm going from a higher unit to a smaller unit, so I multiply. What I would probably have done is convert from kilometers to meters. So in 1 kilometer, there's 1,000 meters. So I would have multiplied it by 1,000. And then in one meter, there are 100 centimeters. So I'm multiplying that by 100. So you could do it either way. It doesn't matter. This is really handy because this is the conversion factors from the English system into the metric system. So you'll want to kind of take notes on those. And so let's look at an example of converting feet to centimeters, centimeters to inches, and then millimeters to feet. So if I want to convert feet to centimeters, I'm going to have to use the conversion factors from the table up here. I'm going to go to the one that has feet in centimeters. So I could write this as 1 foot is 30 divided by 30.48, or I could write it as 30.48 divided by 1, just like we just learned. Because in the problem I'm converting centimeters, I need to use the one, I'm converting feet. Let me see what the problem is. Okay, I'm converting feet. I need the denominator to have feet in it. So that's why I choose this conversion factor, is because it has feet in the denominator. I do the multiplication, I get my answer. So really this problem is no different than the beginning of the lesson. So then if I want to convert from centimeters to inches, I go back to my slide. I go to centimeters and inches, and this is either 1 centimeter divided by inches or inches divided by centimeters. My question says centimeters, so I need centimeters to be in the denominator. So that's why I choose to write it this way. I'm gonna do the division here. So 87 times 1 divided by 2.54 is 34.25 inches. You're always going to get the right unit if you make sure that you're following that denominator rule. In part C, to convert from millimeters to feet. So if I go back to my conversion factor, I don't have a straight way to do that. I can't get from millimeters to feet, but I can get from millimeters to meters and then meters to feet. So I'm going to go from millimeters. I can go from, let's see what we have. I want to go to feet, so I can get from centimeters to inches. I can get from a meter to a yard to a feet. I don't want to do that. Oh, look. So we're going to have to do multiple conversion factors. So I'm going to first go from millimeters to inches for my conversion factor. And then I'm going to go from inches to feet. So I need millimeters in the denominator. This is a two-step problem. And then I'm going to need to go from, that gets me to inches. I need to go from inches in the denominator to feet. So I'm going to do that two-step and get 0.7. The results are close, but not exactly the same. So it's going to be an approximation. And in Alex, you need to make sure that you're rounding to the appropriate place that it tells you to round to. And that's how you'll know how far to take that rounding.